This is part 29 in the series that covers this sensational war diary, written by a platoon leader named Kurz from the motorized SS Division Reich, which in 1942 would become the 2nd SS Panzer Division, das Reich. The last time we were with Kurz, engaged in desperate urban combat, he narrowly escaped being killed when his platoon came under accurate mortar fire. With the 2 remaining StuGs in their battery, enemy bunkers were taken out, and the SS Division Reich was able to continue on towards the Smolensk-Moscow highway. Kurz vor Erreichen der Autobahn stellt sich der Russe nochmals. Shortly before arriving to the highway, the Russians once again entered the fight. At just that moment, approximately 30 tanks from the 10th Panzer Division arrive. They immediately come to the aid of our infantry and repulse the enemy counterattack. And they do it effectively. During these last few days, in our zone of operation and the one to our left where the SS-Regiment Deutschland is operating, a total of 152 Russian tanks have been destroyed. The highway has been reached. In August of 1941, Lieutenant General Wolfgang Fischer took command of the 10th Panzer Division. For most of the division's history, it was organized into 3 regiments, the 7th Panzer, and the 69th and the 86th Panzer Grenadier, which were mechanized infantry. Other units included an artillery regiment and 1 each of motorcycle, reconnaissance, tank destroyer, engineer, and signal battalions. This was the division's insignia, and in 1941 they added the Bison. The advance of the SS Division Reich, however, didn't stop at the highway on October 9th. It continued north towards the strategically important city of Gashat. This is the entry that Corporal Hummer of the 3rd Regiment Deutschland wrote in his diary on this day. Early in the morning, we go over to the attack. We move forwards in the rain with snow flourishes under enemy fire. A number of planes strafe our ranks without much effect. In spite of the resistance, we manage to reach our objective, Gashat. Entering the area, we secure our position. In a large building, we find an orderly canteen hall with large pots of rice with meat completely prepared for eating. Evidently, we've disturbed the Soviets just as they were about to eat lunch and were forced to flee. We enjoy a wonderful meal that the Soviets have prepared for us. The civilian population is friendly, and the apartments that we quarter in are well equipped. A reconnaissance team is put together and sent out to reconnoiter the nearby area to judge the enemy's presence. They head through the woods, crossing a wooden bridge to a nearby town, and see fleeing Russians in all directions. At one point, they actually have to hide in the brush as a large group of Soviets rush past just meters away. All the Russians seem to be retreating and aren't stopping in the next town. They just continue moving on. Having completed their assignment, the team returns and we enjoy a peaceful night's rest. Before we move on to a war diary entry written by the Assault Gun Lutzov's crew, I'd like to thank M45's Patreon supporters. Patrons get access to footage that can't be shown here. Please consider joining our community. You can open a free account at military1945.com to stay informed. Der 9. Oktober. Das Geschütz Lutzow tritt mit der... The StuG Lutzow accompanies the 2nd Regiment der Führer at 0500 hours in the advance towards the village of Molchanova. The Russians fight ferociously at its entrance. With the support of the 6th Company, Lutzow pushes its way into the village and the enemy is forced back. With the defensive positions situated behind the village also taken, the focus of the attack now turns towards the village of Snosky. After a short but intense firefight, the Russians abandon their positions. Suddenly, up on a hill, appear 2 heavy Russian tanks, and Lutzow immediately engages one of them. After a number of direct hits, the tank's turret is tossed high in the air. 1 down. In the meantime, the 2nd tank comes up around Lutzow's side with the intention of ramming him. From another angle, an enemy anti-tank gun begins firing. At this critical moment, the StuG's gun jams. The 2 crew members, Sergeant Waller and Gunner Rosbauer, frantically get to work clearing the gun, and shrapnel from a round that explodes nearby lightly wounds the 2 of them. At the last possible moment, the gun is again ready to fire, and a round is sent at point-blank range into the approaching enemy tank's engine compartment. It bursts into flames and stops dead in its tracks. Lutzow then spins to the side, and with a couple carefully placed rounds, silences the anti-tank gun. Many of our infantrymen lie wounded in the first trench in front of the town. In spite of enemy fire, Lutzow drives over and a number of them are loaded up on top of the StuG and driven back. Accomplishing this, Lutzow turns around and returns for the rest of the wounded soldiers. 200 meters from the Russian positions, Lutzow comes to a halt. They've run out of fuel. The driver, Sergeant Rosbauer, in spite of heavy incoming enemy fire, gets out and heads back on foot, only to later return carrying 2 full canisters of fuel. Lutzow then drives back to Molchanova.